business news, we're news for business people. Good evening. You're watching What Did You Miss on Bloomberg Quint Live. I'm Shraddha Babla. Let's get straight to the headlines. Indian equity benchmarks rose to fresh record highs for the second straight day, led by gains in IT and pharma shares. And as the Indian economy is expected to grow at the slowest rate since 2014, former chief statistician of India says that the slowdown started a lot before demonetization and GST, with the slackening of rural demand. And the Supreme Court refers Article 377 that criminalizes grey sex to a 3-judge bench for a review of its 2013 verdict. The government says it is committed to the freedom of the press after UIDAI files an FIR against the Tribune journalist. The UIDAI too softens its stance, says it will cooperate with the Tribune to find the real offenders. And black is the new red in Hollywood as stars come out strongly against sexual harassment at the Golden Globe Awards. Oprah Winfrey promises to usher in a new day for women. And with that, let's straight head across to Neeraj Shah, who's standing by to take us through all the action on the Dalal Street today. Neeraj, the Nifty and the Sensex both extended their record run for the second straight day, but I believe stocks of hotel companies clearly stood out today.
Well, yes, the Nifty gain to record highs, and a clutch of mid-caps including hotels, specialty chemicals and a few others did very well. Let's recap what happened. Good close, strong close for all the key indices. So Nifty, Nifty Bank, Sensex, all of them closed very well. And the broader market performance, fairly impressive too. So if you look at the mid-cap and the small-cap indices, about 1% apiece. What did well? I think across the board, we had gains. Pharma did extremely well. Sun Pharma, Lupin, some of the smaller names like Wokhart had fairly decent moves, so about 2.5% apiece for each of these names. Good going for the pharma pack in the session today. You also had, ahead of results, technology starting to move up. TCS maybe not so much, but Infosys a big move. There was also this note today, of course, which raised the target price of Infosys, but that stock about 2.5%. So 1,036 for Infosys in the session today. Good going for that one. What took a knock, though, it's telecom. Maybe Jio raising tariffs played that part, but both Bharti and Idea, one Nifty name, one not a Nifty name, but both of these corrected 4.5%. Actually, Idea about 5.5%. So strong downticks that came in for the telcos in the session today. Moving on to the non-market names. The hotel companies and EIH, Indian Hotels, EIH Associated Hotels, Kamath Hotels, you name a hotel company, and that was doing rather well for itself in the session today. That notwithstanding, there were a couple of other pockets. I think chemical-related entities. So Balaji Amines, Alkyl Amines, Deepak Nitrite, that whole pocket clocked in double-digit gains on very strong volumes, mind you. Keep that at the back of your mind. And then there's this talk, and on that basis of the talk of some bit of collaboration or otherwise, remember, just a rumor, nothing that we've confirmed, but I think that got both of these stocks excited. So 8.5% and a 6.5% move apiece on both of these. What didn't do well was GM Breweries, big mover in Friday's session after the numbers, 20% upper circuit. In today's session, down about 6.5%. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But otherwise, net, the broader markets did very well, and the key indices closed in at record highs.
Thanks for bringing us all those details, Neeraj. And like he was actually saying, it's the telecom stocks, Bharti and Idea, which are actually under significant pressure as the telecom tariff war is far from over. Now, Reliance Jio's new tariff plan gives users the option of paying 50 rupees less for the existing amount of data or get 50% more at the same price. And when the newest entrant cuts rates, other telecom operators usually follow suit. But how do they shape up against Jio right now, and who charges the least for data? Somit Sarkar is here with all the answers. Somit.
Jio plans which offer validity of 28 days are available at two different price points, that is 149, 198. Then there's Airtel and Idea which are offering a 199 plan, Airtel and Vodafone offering a 349 rupees plan. Then Idea separately has two other plans of 309 and 357. Now the data offered in these plans differ depending on the prices, but the cheapest plans are offered by Reliance Jio. Now the effective cost per GB for the 149 rupees plans is at 5.3 rupees per GB, which is at a discount of at least 15%. And the effective cost of data per GB at 198 plan is 4.7 rupees per GB, which is at a discount of at least 24%. Now for higher validity plans, if you see, Jio plans are available at different price points ranging from 498 to 349, and the validity and the data offered differs depending on the prices. Competitors like Airtel, Idea and Vodafone also have plans, different plans, and they have tried to match Jio on validity and data GB, data that is per GB data available per day with Jio. But when it comes to cost, they could not. Here also Jio is offering data at a very cheaper plan. Now if you see for competitors in the next plate that is there, the cost per GB ranges from 5.5 to 6.5. While for Jio, if you see in the earlier plate, the cost ranges from 3.6 to 5. In fact, Jio's costliest plan, which offers data at rupees 5 per GB, is also lower than the cheapest plan that is offered by the competitors, which charges around 5.5 rupees per GB. So this clearly shows the stark difference that is there in the data prices charged by the competitors and Jio.
Thank you, Somit. Not surprising to see the reaction that we saw on telecom stocks. But in a move to facilitate speedy resolution of stress accounts, the government has exempted companies facing insolvency proceedings from the minimum alternative tax or MAT. Payaswini Upadhyay has more details on this. Payaswini, a much awaited relief?
Yeah, absolutely. What the tax department has essentially said is that all those companies against whom an insolvency application has been admitted, going forward, they will not face any MAT liability. And here's how the MAT liability works. Say, for instance, any stressed company, all of them require, banks require to take a haircut on interest, and there is also a write-down of loans. Now, this write-down amount and this haircut amount is seen as an income to the company, which attracts a minimum alternate tax of 20%. So let's take an example. A debt of a company, let's say, is 100 rupees. Of that, only sustainable debt going forward is 50 rupees, and 50 rupees has to be written down. This 50 rupees is seen as a gain or an income to the company on which there is a MAT levy that becomes applicable. What the tax department has said is that effective FY 17-18, this MAT liability will not be applicable on such companies. How it was converting into the real environment was bidders or incoming investors were seeing this as a potential liability going forward and were marking down their bids for these stressed assets. So going forward, it's likely that because now this cost goes away, bidders may bid higher for these stressed assets and lenders may get a better value for their loans.
All right, let's see how that will pan out for some of these companies. Thanks, Payaswini, for bringing us those details. Now, moving on to a corporate development with respect to the SR Group. SR Ports just completed a 2,800 crore expansion at its Vizag and Salaya ports. Now, the Mumbai headquartered infra player is hoping that the additional handling capacity will add up to 30% to its total revenue in the next financial year. Purva Chitnis spoke to the company's MD and CEO Rajiv Agarwal to find out if the company has any other capacity expansion plans on the anvil. Hear out what he had to say.
Well, this investment is in line with the overall strategy of improving the infrastructure in some of the key locations in the country. So, we feel that, the ports are a very essential enabler for growth in any country, and our Prime Minister is also highly focused on port-led development. So we had embarked upon this plan to put up a coal terminal in Salaya, which is in Saurashtra, where we do not have any other deep water port. So this was undertaken about 4 to 5 years back, but then it has taken a long time because port projects do take time. And finally, we have been able to complete this first phase of the project, which is the terminal that we have just commissioned, which will help the region to import and export raw materials and dry bulk cargoes in a most efficient manner.
What is the current capacity, and like with these two projects also coming in, how will you scale up the capacity to, and what will it be?
So the current capacity goes up to about 90 million tons, and thereafter we are planning to take it to 110 million tons by the end of next year.
The Indian economy is expected to grow at the slowest pace since 2014 in the current financial year. The first advance estimates released by the Central Statistical Organization pegged the GDP growth for 2017-18 at 6.5% as compared to 7.1% last year. We caught up with the former Chief Statistician of India, Pranab Mukherjee, to understand what is hurting the economy. He says the slowdown started a lot before demonetization and GST, with the slackening of rural demand. Listen in to a slice of that conversation.
The slowdown really starts with the slackening of rural demand. If you think about what happened post-2009, corporate India went into a bit of a slump, but the economy kept going because of the non-corporate sector, and a large chunk of it was essentially being driven by rural demand. And somewhere around 2012-13, rural demand started to flag, and it's continued to do so ever since. So it's now a trend, and it's something that the government really needs to look at very carefully, that here was rural demand which was growing faster than urban demand during the 2004 to 2012 period, now starting to slow down secularly over the last 5 years. And that's a serious issue.
Does that, since you started on the farm sector, sir, does that link into the MSP story, the pace of higher rise in MSP having slowed down? And then if it is partly linked to that, then you get into the debate about, what is appropriate, because you have inflation worries as well to deal with.
Well, yes, it has to do partly with the MSP story, but it also has to do with what's happening globally, because globally agricultural commodity prices softened quite sharply, and India is sensitive to that. So there are lots of bits and pieces that go into this weakening story. But that's only one part of it. The other part of it is that, remember, rural India is not just about agriculture. Agriculture is at its heart, but there's a lot more to it. In fact, now more than 55% of rural incomes really comes from non-agricultural activities. So one has to really look at the rural economy holistically, rather than looking at it essentially as a reflection of agriculture.
Point taken there, sir. But on the farm sector, just one other question I had. So, if you look at the nominal numbers in this time's release, so they're expecting nominal growth at 2.8% for the farm sector compared to 9%. That, in effect, explains the kind of chatter around agrarian distress, because you have the price effect and you have the production effect together taken. Tells you why the farm sector is hurting, sir.
Yes, it is, and that's exactly correct. And this has now been happening, actually, if you really look at this period I'm talking about, which is post-2012-13, is that farm prices have been seriously depressed. So the terms of trade are moving against agriculture, which means that even though we've had fairly poor agriculture because of droughts and because of demonetization, the price effect simply adds to those woes. And that's something quite serious.
Meanwhile, the former governor of the RBI, Raghuram Rajan, believes that the global economy is firing on all cylinders, but is cautious about the inflationary risk to monetary policy as well as the financial sector risk. Speaking to Bloomberg TV's Michael McKee, Rajan says that the best thing to do right now is the steady removal of monetary accommodation rather than a sudden shock to the markets. Listen in.
Whenever there is asset price inflation, you have to ask why it is that way. And clearly there are some supports for it. Growth is strong for the first time across the world. You're seeing Europe come back very strongly in the last few quarters. Japan is going the normal way it goes, a country with a labor force declining at 1% a year. For it to grow at 1.5% is great. And the US is doing reasonably well. So with all the engines firing on the real side, there is some optimism. The concerns have to do with two factors. One is the monetary side and second, the financial side. On the monetary side, when do we see inflation? If in fact you have strong growth, you have economies at levels of unemployment which haven't been seen for a long, long time, when do we see more wage inflation? When do we see that translate more into goods inflation? That's the question on the monetary side. When that happens, you will find interest rates picking up more strongly, and of course that will have an effect on asset prices. The other factor is the financial side. How much debt have we built up in these years, in these go-go years, on the retail side, on the government side, on the corporate side? Covenant-light loans are at an all-time high at this point. So the question is, at that point, when interest rates start picking up, when liquidity seems a little less available than it is now, do we see a substantial reaction on the financial side?
Well, that's the question. When does this stop becoming just a talking point among academics on Twitter and become something that policymakers need to address?
Well, the question is, what do you do to address it? And I think the best thing that can be done at this point is a steady removal of monetary accommodation. As the economies look strong, let's not try pushing it to the last limit. I think as you remove monetary accommodation, you signal also that the financial side needs to adapt, and you give them time to adapt, which is important. So the buildup of leverage that you see, both the implicit leverage in positions as well as the explicit leverage in debt, I think that will start tapering off if in fact there is a signal that accommodation will be taken off. Now, you have to do it in a steady way because you could affect asset prices considerably if it comes as a shock.
But you don't think the argument that we can let rates stay where they are because we're not seeing any inflation is worthwhile?
Well, I think central banks obviously are forward-looking. They have to ask, is this going to stay the way it has been, going forward? And the one thing that is changing is earlier you had slack somewhere in the world. Today, with unemployment coming down across the world, the sense has to be that there's less slack. And as a result, the competitive pressures across the world, which kept wage growth down, may not show up as much going forward. So wage growth will possibly pick up. You already see inflation in some countries, Canada, for example, picking up more strongly. The second aspect of this is really central banks are also at the back of their mind thinking about financial sector risk. That it's not the front of mind is inflation, but if financial sector risk is also building up, we should not surprise the world suddenly with an inflation report which shows we are way behind the curve. So I think that would suggest, so long as there's this uncertainty, steady, slow removal of accommodation makes sense.
The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Transport is not in favour of privatising Air India just yet. Now, the 31-member panel headed by Trinamool Congress leader Derek O'Brien has recommended that the national carrier be given at least another 5 years to post a turnaround. Now, this report comes at a time when the government has already invited bids to sell the airline either in parts or as a whole. And in what comes as a renewed hope for the gay community in India, the Supreme Court has deferred its earlier verdict on Section 377 of the IPC to a larger bench. Now, the three-judge bench hearing a petition seeking to declare Section 377 as unconstitutional said that there needs to be further debate on the matter. Now, under Section 377 of the IPC, unnatural offences can be punishable by law. Now, these offences include consensual sex between two individuals regardless of their sexual orientation. Senior advocate Arvind Dattar, appearing for the petitioner, said that the penal provision was unconstitutional. Remember, the Delhi High Court had in 2009 struck down Section 377, calling it unconstitutional. However, the Supreme Court has set aside the order in its 2014 judgment, saying that the onus was on the government to frame appropriate laws. And shifting focus, the government today said that it was fully committed to uphold the freedom of the press after an FIR was issued against a journalist from the Tribune for exposing chinks in the Aadhaar program. Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad said that maintaining the security and sanctity of Aadhaar was paramount to India's development. He also said that the requested DAI to seek support from the Tribune to help the police find the real offenders. UIDAI too responded, saying that it will be reaching out to the Tribune and Rachna Khera, the reporter who broke the story, to help with the investigations. The Tribune report created quite a stir in the Aadhaar debate, as it has highlighted potential security lapses in the Aadhaar scheme that could be availed for a meager sum of just 500 rupees. But if you are one of those million addictive virtual farmers playing Farmville, waking up in the middle of night to harvest your tomatoes, here's your chance to do it in real life. How? Well, a Bengaluru-based startup, Farmizen, allows customers to rent a portion of the land to grow their own crops. Bloomberg Quint's Nishant Sharma visited one of these farms to see how it works. Take a look.
Well, in 2009, a virtual farm gaming startup, Farmvilla, took internet by storm, more specifically Facebook, where millions of people went online to have their own virtual farms. And they were sowing seeds, taking care of the farm, and harvesting virtual fruits and vegetables. But what if I tell you, you can do all that in real time, on a real farm, and can harvest real fruits and vegetables? So we are in one of your farms. Tell us about what is Farmizen and what is this real-time farm villa that you're doing?
The idea is very simple. As a consumer, today we are not able to get safe, traceable food, right? So because of that, a lot of us have started growing our own food in balconies and terrace gardens, etc., right? But there are two problems that we usually face. The two problems are, one is of space, right? If you have a small balcony, we can't grow enough food ourselves. The second problem is that of time, right? Because even if I have space, I live in a big house, it will take a lot of effort for me to actually go ahead and take the continuous care that is required to grow my own food, right? So those two problems are what we wanted to necessarily solve. So the way we do it is very simple, right? Consumers have an app, right? And using that app, they book a mini farm. A mini farm is 600 square feet in size, right? And you as a consumer, you use the app to control what you want to plant in each of them, right? For example, this consumer has said, let me put palak here, let me put cabbage there, let me put brinjals there, let me put tomatoes there, and so on and so forth. So when you do all of these things, farmers actually go ahead and plant those on the ground, right? So all of the actions you are taking on the app are actually getting implemented on the field. And that's how it's different from the virtual farm bill. You can come and harvest your own produce yourself whenever the produce is ready, and you can know it through the app as well, right? So you get updates like your tomatoes are now flowering, your brinjals are ready to harvest, etc. But if you can't come and harvest your own produce, we'll anyway home deliver it to you every week.
And what's in it for farmers? I mean, why do they want to partner with you?
See, India's farmers are in a lot of distress, right? When consumers subscribe for this service, they are paying every month, right? So farmers' cash flows are taken care of, right? They don't have to wait for 3 months to get their first money. There is no price risk, because some prices will go up, some prices will go down, because they are growing so many different crops together, and because consumers are paying a fixed fee every month. Now in this model, because you are growing so many things together, because you are doing it naturally, because you are creating like small micro environments everywhere, so end of the day, your farm productivity itself start improving. So who gains the most from that? It's the farmer, his land, right? His soil becomes much better.
And you mentioned today is one of such days where the harvest is going to be delivered.
That's correct.
How about I'm getting onto that one of your delivery trucks and visiting one of the families?
Sounds good. Sounds good. That will be exciting. I think we have 32 deliveries planned today, so I am sure you won't want to spend time doing all of those 32 deliveries, but
I can surely try one or two.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The harvest of the day is all loaded into this truck. I'm going to hop into this and get it delivered at the customer's doorstep.
We prefer this farmazine where we can grow 12 type of vegetables, right from dal, vegetable, fruit, we buy organic only. So we wanted to grow more vegetables in our garden, but there is very little space. Best part of farmazine is whenever we want, we can go, we can harvest ourselves vegetables, and we can educate others, people and children, everybody about organic and how it is good for our health as well as for the environment.
Well, that does have a very close resemblance to the farms in Farmville if you've played it ever. But let's move on to the international developments, where former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon has issued a lengthy apology to Donald Trump and his family over the comments that he made in the book Fire and Fury. Now, Bannon's comments about the Trump Jr.'s meeting with Russian nationals in 2016 being treasonous and unpatriotic appeared in Michael Wolff's book. In his apology, Bannon said that Trump Jr. is both patriotic and a good man. Bannon also stated that his support for President Trump's agenda is unwavering, adding that his comments about the Russian meeting had been aimed at Trump's campaign manager, who at that time was Paul Manafort, instead of Trump Jr. Meanwhile, Oprah Winfrey's powerful speech at the 75th Golden Globe Awards is dominating the headlines today. Now, the first major Hollywood awards ceremony was marked by celebrities getting activists as their dates and wearing black in solidarity of the Time's Up movement. Now, Time's Up is a defense fund which pays for the legal defense for victims of sexual harassment at workplaces. Oprah condemned brutally powerful men for breaking the cultural fabric of society and hoped that we move towards a society where no one has to say "Me Too" again.
Have not been heard or believed if they dared to speak their truth to the power of those men. But their time is up. Their time is up. So I want all the girls watching here and now to know that a new day is on the horizon. And when that new day finally dawns, it will be because of a lot of magnificent women, many of whom are right here in this room tonight, and some pretty phenomenal men fighting hard to make sure that they become the leaders who take us to the time when nobody ever has to say "Me Too" again.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on the show. I hope we helped you catch up all that you missed through the day. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint Live.